Well, out of respect for everybody's time, one thing I like to do is try to start on time. I'm still looking for 2 members from the HISWIG, but as anybody in this hotel knows, just wandering around out here, a lot of folks end up lost for a period of time, and eventually they'll find their way. So once they get here, we'll add them in. But I want to go ahead and start. It just kind of shows you the topic of this discussion is not just with the military. The hotel here actually has an app that you can put on your phone that gets you around direction-wise. It'll say, here's where you're at, where do you want to go, you put in where you want to go, and it'll give you the quickest route. However, it only works if you have an iPhone or an iPad, because they have not gotten the Droid version of that out yet. So even the hotel is not interoperable. So I'm Steve Mundt. If things go the way we think they're going to go tomorrow night during the elections for Quad A, the slate of nominees, I will become the president of Quad A tomorrow night, and so I welcome you all here on behalf of Quad A. This is an amazing event that when you think about where we started with little L4, L2 Piper Cubs as an aviation asset to the ground commander, and what we have evolved into, all of us as nations with our aviation assets, you see how large and how complex those maneuvers are. I've had an opportunity to work with probably 90% of the countries that I know that are in attendance here in different ways. I was just in Europe last year doing some things, but I was also down in Colombia at a huge conference that they have where they highlight the Colombian forces, and we're very, very honored this year to have the Colombian, the new General Trujillo, who's taking over the Air Assault Division down there, and he is here looking for good ideas. But let me tell you, they were very, very impressive what I saw last year. We don't have Thailand here this year. They did come last year, but we've got a great group of folks to talk about a very interesting issue. Why is this germane to me? Well, first of all, it's not because Quad A said, let's do an international panel. It's because I went to Quad A and said, we have the HISWIG here, we have other things here. We need to start talking as an international group on how we solve or how we work towards this common idea of interoperability. I spent 32 years in the Army. I retired in 2008 as the director of Army Aviation. I went to work then for Airbus, selling aircraft around the world. And the one thing I know is from last year what we learned, it does not matter that you buy the same platform. There are many folks in this room that have Blackhawks or have Apaches or have Tiger or have NH-90, but they're not the same. They've got the same name, but they've got all sorts of different MEP, mission equipment packages, all sorts of different capabilities. And so when you as a commander are trying to work that with the ground force, what you very quickly find is it's not as easy as you think. You can't just say, well, I know what an Apache does. No, what does that Apache do? Or what does that Tiger do? Or what does that aircraft do? So I think it's something we've got to get after, we've got to look at. And so I'm very, very excited about this panel. This is the second year we've run it. Last year, we started out, and just so you know about being interoperable, I actually came. I liaisoned with Quad A. I'm part of Quad A. I had my slides. I worked them with the leadership here and all the folks. And somehow or other, my slides didn't get transmitted and aren't in the package in the back. So if anybody wants them, we can always make them available afterwards. But basically, I wanted to do kind of an intro. Fortunately, not only do we have the head of the Colombian Air Assault Division, but we also have Major Michael Grichenko, who is here with us tonight from France. And he is here in the audience because this, too, is an issue to them. But on the panel, we have Colonel Hubert Dotu, and then we'll have, when the HISWIC guys get here, Colonel Andreas Henne and Mr. Cornelius Burton, and he goes by Ham. And then we're fortunate to have Colonel Jules Feiffer from the United Kingdom. So We've got some, but in the future, I'm looking to get more people added to the panel and get a bigger flavor. Last year, we said, how do we balance all of these competing demands? And when I say competing demands, I'm talking about, first of all, if you talk technology, technology is moving at an explosive rate. Today, if you have a cell phone, okay, there is more power in this cell phone today than there was in what we called in the United States the Cray computer when I was a lieutenant coming in the Army that ran the entire nuclear arsenal in the United States. I mean, it has come so fast. And the first phone I had as a battalion commander came in a bag. It was a commercial phone, but it was probably about this big, about the size of a loaf of bread. And I had to carry it on a strap around. And if I was lucky, I might get a signal. And, now you can go just about anywhere. And not only can you get a telephone signal, but you can get almost anywhere now an internet signal and talk for free, basically, on this around the world. So it's how fast is technology exploding, and are we going to be able to keep up at that pace? Because, quite candidly, the United States Army is not interoperable. And I know that there'll be some people who go, I don't believe that. Well, when we went to the first Gulf War, we had a corps that was partially digitized, and the rest of the Army was not. And trying to fight in a digital battlefield with 70% of the forces that weren't digitized, you couldn't. So when the Army starts talking in the U.S. about modernization, even when they start buying the first piece of equipment, it's normally 10 to 15 years before those last units get them. It's a matter of budget. Can you afford it? Can you keep doing it? And if you can't do it, can you actually fight on the battlefield? Because our adversaries are working very hard to prevent it. Hey, Ham, whenever you guys want to come up, you know where Andreas is? Okay, all right. So, when we show up and we want to do that, you just can't do it fast enough. I was talking about when I was a young officer in the U.S. Army, one of the first experiences I had was working in Europe. And what I found was my German counterparts, French counterparts, British counterparts, the Netherlands, everybody else, we all had different equipment. We were all trying to operate. We were doing good things, but we had a lot of very basic things. Like we used to have cards in our cockpit, and they were just numbers. And you'd pull out, a number. You'd put the two numbers together or whatever, hold them up in the window, and every aircraft could see the number and knew what the next step was. And it was a very simple, very sophisticated or unsophisticated way of doing business, but it got the word done. Today, can we actually talk in a secure mode between all of us? Or do we go to an unsecure mode to try to talk? So technology is huge. What I was going to say is that Luxembourg, who I trained with, the commander of that brigade of forces was the Prince of Luxembourg. Well, when they wanted to equip their force with something, they had one brigade, they just went out and bought it. Everybody was equipped at one time. Everybody went to the next level. Most of us can't afford to do that with the size of our forces. So, it takes time. We talked about how complex this world is, how unpredictable it is. You've heard the U.S. Army, you heard this morning with Lieutenant General McConville, with Major General Gaylor, all of them up talking specifically about how we are now talking about how do we operate not like we used to in land warfare, or air-land battle, or the other things that have come before, but how do we operate in this new multi-domain? Just come on up whenever you're ready. You can just, but how do we operate in that environment? We have Army forces now that are starting to pick up missions that we never would have thought about before. Part of what the Navy's asking the U.S. Army to do is how can you take your platforms, your long-range missiles, the rest, and use them in a way that can bring capability into the straits and into the seas so that we can open up sea lanes. That's not a mission we had before. A lot of us in the U.S. Army in the last 10 years have been operating off of the deck of ships because it allows us to project and it allows us to come back to a safe haven and then go back. So you've got a complex. Not only is this a joint, it's not just NATO, Most of us are all operating in coalitions. In many places, whether it be Afghanistan, whether it be in the Sinai, and a lot of places we're operating with a lot of countries we haven't operated before. Same thing in South America, Latin America. A lot of different countries doing the same thing, and so it makes it difficult as you think about it. And then I've already talked about the cost. So again, last year when we talked, the piece that we started with was we tried to use what the U.S. Has come up with, my naivety, and what I said is, hey, let's use a framework to address our problem. And we did the DOTLM PF discussion. Well, okay, so we've talked about doctrine, we talked about organizations, we talked about training, leadership, material, what we're using to fight, personnel, and then facilities. Well, then as we're talking about this, I realized that this is not the same definition that many of the countries that were on the panel use. So what is it that we can use as a framework as we have this discussion? Because we will fight together. It will happen when we least expect it to happen. It's been proven time and time again. So it will be very rapid. We'll be thrown into this. And we can rely a lot on leadership, but leadership can't do the whole thing. So with that, that's just kind of an opening. What I want to do is we're going to go down the panel with the introductory remarks. So, I'm going to let Ham talk a little bit about what he's doing and how that's all happening, and then we'll just go down, and if you have slides, we'll bring the slides up. If you don't have slides, you do have slides, okay? Well, then we got to make sure the guys in the back have them, because they don't do us any good. I'm figuring that out. All right. Now, for those of you a lot of you have been with the HISWIC group, but I will not steal their thunder, but they have been here in the United States with a number of you already. Started over a week ago in the, they picked really, really bad places that they have to visit. So last week they were in New Orleans, down in Louisiana with their conference, and then they moved from there up to here to link up and then do the HISWIC, the helicopter piece of that. So. Okay. So Cornelius, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully I won't bore you too much. My name is Cornelius Burton, but better known by Ham. Yes, Ham. It's quite simple, probably a little bit funny. I'm stationed at NATO. I work for the Army G3, General Staff out of the Pentagon, and I'm at NATO, and I've been at NATO for about 20 years, give or take a month or two. My involvement is in the standardization arena, interoperability. So for the military committee, I oversee for the Army General Staff's Army G357, all of their activities from a land domain requirement. What I'm going to do briefly is talk to you quickly about what we're working on now in the scope of multinational environment within NATO. That's interoperability, standardization and interoperability. Let me give you one here too again. So, again, we all hold dear the idea of creating friendships, involvement with each other, whether it's from a purely military point of view or personal point of view. That is the main goal to achieve any form of multinational coalition operations within the NATO scheme, interoperability. So the first thing is the human traits, how we work together as human. Because again, without humans, the other part, the procedures and the technical part doesn't exist. We create, we build, we design. We humans, we do this. So the first thing we have to identify is how we work together. The second part of it is the standardization process. And based on the NAC, the North Atlantic Council, that's the Supreme Council at NATO, the highest level, Standardization is probably the key support barrier for interoperability. Okay, so we speak about interoperability, we talk about interoperability. When I say speak, we speak at each other about interoperability, and then we talk amongst ourselves within our national environment about interoperability. Two different scopes of working here, of thought. What I would like to do is convey to you that the need for interoperability has grown based on what we are now facing as multinational nations. And I won't say the alliance, I'll say multinational nation, because everyone has an intricate part in how we deal with the current threats that we'll face. Next slide, please. So we have the dimensions. And within the policy of NATO, the main policy, technical is the lead, procedural is the next, human is the third. However, you could reverse that because you see each one complements the other one. And that's why I use the human domain first. I go the procedural and then the technical, because humans drive the development of procedures. Okay, operational experience will either add the improvement of a capability that has been developed, okay, or that needs to be developed. So again, the human factor is the driving one. And the one thing that I was told by a retired general, and I think you know him well, General Schwartz, is that sometimes when you develop things too quickly and you don't pull everyone along with you at a pace where we all can work together, sometimes you find yourself in the lead alone. Okay, and that's what we're doing now at NATO much better. We're involving everyone in the process. That's why NATO is a consensus. You need all 28 countries to agree, to say yes, in all aspects. So you say, wow, well, different cultures, different languages, and my counterpart here, the Colonel, will tell you, getting people to agree and meet twice a year is not an easy task. So that's the political level within a military framework structure or reverse. Okay, next slide. Components of interoperability. That is in itself a mystery, because we can write the word components of interoperability, but the word is so large, so huge. I came from Alabama, so I'm farming. So I can go out and say, okay, I have 5 cows, 10 chickens. But at the end of the day, is that what I really have? Because I don't see the larger picture. I don't see what those 5 can produce, what those 10 can produce. Interoperability can produce multiple multiplier requirements. Okay. We are now looking at, I was talking with fuel, with the chairman, and I said, question, can any country provide fuel to DEU helicopter, rotary wing? And I said, can any country pull up, fill up, and move out? And you have to be honest with each other when you're talking. And he said, because there's certain requirements to be able to test this fuel to see if it will work within the craft or the vehicle. So, and you think about this and you say, that's not critical. Well, when you pull up and you fill up and you can't drive off or fly off, you have a problem. Okay, same thing with water. I have a question. What's more expensive, a gallon of water or a gallon of fuel? Someone said it. Yeah, what? And why is it? Right? Most of the fuel requirements are based on taxes, the payment. Water has to be defined because it meets so many requirements, right, from a medical point of view. So the scheme, the amount of requirements that go into developing a gallon of water is really huge. Now, me from the U.S., if I'm in the military, can I drink the water from Germany? Most likely the answer is no. Yeah. All right. Bottled water. How do you take bottled water and in turn certify that it's drinkable? But it's bottled. That's why you build standards. I'm working on a team now that's developing standards. But the part of that we had to negotiate was the interoperability piece, right? Because downrange or in any conflict, any environment, if you don't have water, you're dead completely. Water, fuel, munitions, food, however. Next slide. Okay, in green, it said, and this is from the NATO highest level, standardization will continue to be the key element. Standardization consists of doctrine development, all right? How we work together, the levels that we can work together and achieve a certain goal. You don't have that with interoperability. It doesn't exist. It's so difficult to capture the different scopes, the methodology of interoperability. So I've been tasked to be the chairman of a land interoperability working group, and we're developing a military committee policy to try and tackle some of these concerns and problems. And I can tell you that it's a topic that you can continue to talk about from day to day to day. How many people in here are familiar with NATO or have worked at NATO? Okay, so what would be your biggest concern?
Sorry, the language? It's just a matter of interoperability.
Mm-hmm. So,
also training, not only material, but training.
There you go. When I go out and I go to different countries, a lot of the leadership talk about legacy systems, okay? And they don't talk about legacy systems meaning that they are out of date. It's how to apply them in a required operation. Can they apply them? When you have a lead nation for fuel, a lead nation for artillery, a lead nation for any of the defense planning requirements within NATO, okay, now you have to determine the soldier's capability. Now, if I'm in France and the language is French, okay, now I have to reinvent my way of thinking because the culture is different, right? There's nothing wrong with speaking, French, just like speaking Lithuanian or either Czechoslovakian or either Slovakian. Again, our mindset is designed to believe that everyone has to do something a certain way. Instead of approaching it and saying, okay, teach me and I'll learn. But when you go in with the mindset that, you're blocked from the beginning because of a language barrier, it goes nowhere. Again, the human factor being the main core if you want to achieve interoperability. Next slide. The way ahead. How do you analyze and evaluate interoperability when it hasn't been done at the highest level? Now, I can tell you the Army is on a road race, right, on how we do interoperability. How will we do interoperability in the future? Not just internally, but externally. So multinational. They are developing requirements, doing taskers. So it's something that I've been involved in NATO for the last 10, 15 years. But now the U.S. Army has kicked in. And I've noticed that throughout NATO, this is a very large undergoing. But the key point is understanding. Do we do it through updating procedures and process? That's one of the possibilities. Because if you do that, you have a better understanding. But you can only do that, and the chairman will attest to that here, participation from nation. You can't attend all meetings. That's understood because of boundaries of financial boundaries, funding. But you have to find the ones that are pertinent to your nation and participate. If you do not, you will lose out because reading a document after it's been developed does no one any good. It doesn't provide any outcome achievable outcome for your nation. So having a voice, having a vote, exercise that by participation. And then validating your tools and capabilities. I work with the NATO Joint Lesson Learned Center. Great group of guys. And the biggest misconception about that body is they evaluate. No, joint chalk, joint analysis. They help you analyze what you bring to them. They help you cook the food. You bring in the food, they help you cook it. Okay. And we do a great job, the group that I'm with in this particular body, and what we're trying to do is design a tool that can validate interoperability levels and requirement during an exercise, a training exercise. We're going to put that to test during what we call Capable Load Station 2019, which will be in Poland in 2019. So we will probably be one of the first, if not the first, bodies within NATO to try and evaluate and analyze interoperability. So there's no failure to this if you call the shots correctly. If you call it what you see and you put it on paper, there's always a win. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our next speaker will be Colonel Andreas Henne, and he's the chair of the NATO HISWIG group.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody, and I think, Ham, you covered all main points, and there are not too much points left, but let me bring in some sentence to maybe to the HISWIG. But before this, I will say to you that I'm in my normal German military life. I'm in the German Army Concept and Capability Development Center, and I'm the chief of the Army Aviation Branch. And during this time here, I'm the chairman of the HISWIG, that is the Helicopter Inter-Service Working Group. And our main objective of this working group is to harmonize and to standardize procedures that may create, let me this way, that create a common mindset how to work with military things. To have modern equipment, for example, is good, but not good enough. And Ham, you mentioned it, it's only one side of the medal. The other side of the medal is that we have to come to common procedures, to common training, and only with this we will able to be find successful together. And the HISWIG will provide the nations with these standard procedures, which are necessary and which could be a baseline for common training and fighting. Also, you mentioned it, I will do it again. That's a long way, and it's a very bright and far field. And you must have something like a vision. You must have an idea of the end state. But the way to this vision is so long that, in my experience, we have to accept that also very small steps forward are successful, and we have to try hard for every small step forward. I don't know if we ever will reach this vision, this end state, but every small step is good. And let me say at the end, one example for this long way. After having a good idea how to standardize procedures under military aspects, there are often national legal aspects. And these national legal aspects to standardize, to harmonize, are often more difficult than the military aspects. And you mentioned it also. For example, there is always one guy who is responsible for handing over a helicopter, a technical guy handing over a helicopter to the crew. And he is also responsible for the fuel. And if we don't know what kind of fuel it was that was filled in, I think he will not hand over this helicopter. So he will check this fuel. And I think normally good, but that can't be the standard. We have to trust the other one, and when the other one told us we have fit the standards, then they fit the standards. And we can use this fuel. And this is the way I think we have to go forward. In my experience, it's worth only to do small steps, one after another. And so we will closely come together. And a very good example is the German Division Rapid Forces, where we try to come close together with the Dutch 11th Airborne Brigade, which is incorporated in this division. And during our common exercises, we have a lot of these examples, like fuel. Another big example is under swing load. There are totally different procedures for under swing load. And if a Dutch guy prepared let me say, a vehicle as a swing load for a German helicopter, no, there must be a German technical officer who release this vehicle as a sling load for a German helicopter. And you can do this, but I think it's the second best way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. While we're sitting here, I'm going to take the liberty as the moderator and ask a gentleman from the audience to join us, and I'll have him go at the end. But we're fortunate to have Chris Waters here, who is the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade Commander in Europe. And so I'm going to let him speak at the end. So, Chris, if you want to come up here, I'll give you this slot right here. Okay, so with that, however, can we move on to Colonel Hubert Duteau? Does it work? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
General, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Colonel Hubert Duteau. I'm the head of training at the French Army Aviation School. So first of all, sorry for my very strong accent for the American. If you do not understand me, raise the hand. I will try to speak in another way, okay? Yes. Very shortly, I will not provide you with a comprehensive briefing on interoperability, because first, as you understand, I'm dealing with training. I'm not a capability manager linked with this subject. Nevertheless, it will be a point of view, a French one, with perhaps a different view. First of all, we'll just tell you in which type of interoperability working group we are involved, the French. It's not only Nato. Most of the time, it's a bilateral issue, and we like that, especially with the US. Second, and we'll do it very quickly, equipment and procedures. Sure, that's the earth of the NATO working group. But moreover, are all the challenges as regards the concepts, the doctrine, who are key for being interoperable. And I'm not sure we are very in a very good step or in a good shape for being interoperable in the matter. So next slide, please. As regards the French framework for interoperability, we are part of this ISWIC group from NATO. We'll not give you any information about it. We just got them. And last year, the French Army Chief of Staff and the US Army Chief of Staff signed a strategic vision statement. What does it mean? It means that by 2020, a French brigade should be able to be under the order of a US division, and vice versa. And same things for an American division to be under the command of corps, level 1 corps, French HQ. This is a very ambitious objective, and I'm not sure they will practice the NATO procedures as regards the HQs. We will see that. Will they bring their own procedure, national ones, or will they should normally work with the NATO one? We'll see that. And we have also a bilateral working group with the German first, because they are their closest allies. We share a very strong history with the German, and we have common material too. So we have a French-German military cooperation group, and it works, but very slowly, because it could be something that surprises you, the Americans, but we have a lot of different cultural habits between the French and the German, and it's sometimes difficult to understand each other. We have one other with the Brits. It's based on an agreement that is called Lancaster House Agreement between both presidents. And the aim, the objective is to be able to deploy a combined joint expeditionary force. This is a way in which the French and the Brits are operating an expeditionary force. So as you can see, it's a lot of bilateral relationships in order to develop the interoperability, and not only amongst all the allies in NATO. When you are 20 nations to try to be interoperable, you deal with only very specific things, and not you cannot deeply inside the interoperability matter. And we are part too of a lot of multinational operation. And for that, you need to be interoperable with the others, not only NATO. France is widely involved in the Africa countries, and those have some units and material too, and we have to try to be interoperable with those guys. Next slide, please. So very quickly, as regards the equipment and procedure issues, the key point is the CIS. And NATO is working very well and very strong for that. So usually we should be able to communicate, even if it's not working for everybody, and mainly for the helicopter, on which it's quite long and quite difficult to change all the radio and all the communication system. It's like on vehicles, you know. So it could sometimes take time, and part of the equipment of those helicopters are interoperable, but some of them are not. And one of the other aspects are the procedures. And for the helicopter, it's quite simple. All the procedures that deals with close air support, combat, close attack, medevac, CSAR, personal recovery, this is something which is well masterized by all the nations. The procedures are written. It's each time rehearsal during exercise. So usually it's not a main issue, and it works well for that. Currently, there is one main issue, if I'm well aware about this week, it's to determine what type of qualification our pilot should have in order to give to the force commander the capabilities of the different helicopters they have under the command. It's a difficult issue because we have national regulation in the matter, you know. And so his week is now going deeper and deeper in sub-technical issue. Next slide, please. But the main point for me, and are the challenging one, it's the tactics. The tactics, concept, doctrines. So for the French, the concept is the why. Why to do it? For what? I'm precising that because for some other countries, it's not the same definition. And the doctrine is how to do it. How do we do it for the why? And the how, if we have a common why, the how can be very, very different, and many amongst NATO allied. Some aviation are linked with the Air Force and are Air Force driven, meaning that they have a lot of missions at time on target mission with a very huge planning process. And some other nations, like the US and the French, have an aviation that is linked with the ground forces, with more freedom of movement and driven by the rhythm of the ground forces. And I would like to highlight that, saying that for the French, aviation is a maneuver unit. that can maneuver without a huge planning process and on an unexpected enemy. I'm differencing two situations for giving you an example. If you have an enemy that you know very well, 95% of your enemy is well known, it's quite, I think, easy to be interoperable and to have different helicopters from different nations having an effect on this enemy. But if one day you have only 60% of the information about the enemy and 40% is unknown, will you come? Do you want to share the mission with others? Quite difficult. So that is why this is a part of interoperability which is not yet successful, and it would take time to be able to intervene together, face an enemy that we have to shape and to tackle, and it will take time to do it. Now I'm thinking that there are different ways to do it, not only working group, but mainly the training. And we have example in France in which we are sharing training with our ally, Germany, Spanish, and with other exercises and exchanges. As regards the training, for example, we have a common helicopter with a German, which is a Tiger. It's a common helicopter as regards the frame, as regards the blade, the engines. But as regards the armament, quite different. Armament is different and doctrine is different. And we are sharing a common training center in southeast of France, in which the German and the French are delivering the training for the pilot. But it's side-by-side training. And it's very difficult for us to standardize our procedures and our tactics, mainly. So if we are not successful, you can imagine how in NATO it will be difficult. It's starting to be better. I'm sorry to tell that to my friend. He's there. He was one of the deputy commander to the Tiger training school in France. We have the Spanish being embedded in the school. Why? Because they bought the same French Tiger with the same weapons, the same armament. And now it's easier to work with them because we bought the helicopter first and they got it later on and they asked us to show us how to use it and at the same time to show us which type of tactic we were practicing. And it's getting better now, having some Spanish instructor being able to teach to French students, trainees. Amazing. It works well in English. So sometimes it works when it's bilateral, when you have common tools and common armament. And next slide, the last one. Conclusion. It's mandatory for us to be successful in matter of interoperability. I'm pretty sure of that. But it's a lot of challenges. And it's not only NATO process, which is key, but probably a bilateral cooperation with the one who likes you. You know, for the French, for example, it's the US, the German, the Brits, the Spanish, and those bilateral cooperations through exercise, training, and exchanges will be key to increase our interoperability. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Colonel Duton. And now I will go to Colonel Jules Feiffer from the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, General. A great pleasure to be here today. To give you a little bit of a flavour for my background, my aviation background is about 4.5 years operating Gazelle on the front line, then followed by about 3.5 years operating Apache as the UK Apache program rolled in. I've recently been on the training side for the last 5 years, running both the Army's flying training and then subsequently Defence's initial flying training for all three services. I'm now, my current job is as the head of air manoeuvre capability development within the Army headquarters, so responsible for aviation and air manoeuvre capability as we move forward into the future. So that's who you have sat in front of you to give you a flavour for who I am. So some thoughts on interoperability from a UK perspective. One of the major things to begin with is to work out what level of interoperability you require. deconflicted, compatible, or fully integrated. And depending on what you're trying to achieve, that drives you in various directions. And of course, some of the key areas absolutely revolve around equipment, but as has been mentioned previously, equipment is not the be-all and end-all, and there are many other aspects to interoperability. Tactics, techniques and procedures, TTPs, and terminology being but two key elements of it. So terminology, for example, what do we understand by the degraded visual environment? What do we understand right down at the lower levels by brownout in the way in which we deal with it and operate? And those things mean slightly different things to slightly different people. And unless we're all talking the same language, I don't mean English, but unless we're all talking the same language, then trying to get up and running on the interoperability side is very difficult indeed. However, what I'll do first of all, though, is turn slightly closer to home, and the General mentioned it in his opening remarks. But I think our first challenge is interoperability within our own aviation forces. So that is a real challenge which we have to overcome. We work hard to do so, but we have definitely not cracked that one, and that is just looking close to home before we even look across any international borders at our allies and partners. So within our own forces, we have marshalled our aviation into two broad areas within the land and the littoral environments. We have the Joint Helicopter Command, who are responsible for the generation operation of that capability across all three services, across the Air Force, the Army, and the Royal Navy elements that operate in those spheres. And then on the other hand, the Royal Navy are responsible for the maritime element. And again, a big gulf between the two different ways of working as far as that's concerned. Within the land and littoral element, presided over by the Joint Helicopter Command, we have some fairly meaty interoperability challenges, whether you are looking at interoperating with some of our big bits of equipment. So, for example, the new carriers we're bringing in, a real challenge on that front. Or whether it's to the more fundamental and intricate issues of interoperability as far as communications is concerned. And that's communications with our own ground forces, let alone anybody else's aviation or ground forces. The Joint Helicopter Command has gone a long way to bring the three services together in terms of the aviation language that we speak, and therefore the way we interoperate on that front. And this has been ongoing since 1999, and it is a difficult journey, and it's not over yet by a long chalk. So just a flavour of, focusing first of all right in at home in terms of the challenges we have, just being able to operate within our own aviation forces across three different services, and then how we interact within the land and littoral environment in which we are expected to. Looking across international boundaries then in terms of international interoperability, clearly NATO is absolutely at the core of this, and therefore forums like the NATO HISWIG and the like are hugely important in the way in which we drive that understanding and common purpose to be able to operate much more effectively together. Coalition operations also do not necessarily sit entirely within the NATO boundary or indeed driven on a NATO footing. So again, those other international partners that we operate with and the interoperability nation on nation is absolutely key to us. And we've seen that in recent conflicts such as Afghanistan and Libya, to name a couple of good examples. Our Chief of the General Staff, so looking at it from very much from an Army point of view, we have the defence lines of development when we look at how we develop capability, which looks across training, equipment, personnel, doctrine, and others. And he has turned around and absolutely mandated that interoperability, which is not one of those recognised defence lines of development, is to be one of those lines. Although he clearly, as the Chief of the Army, can't dictate defence policy, but interoperability is to sit at the heart of anything we do as far as capability development is concerned. And looking very much towards our partners, and in fact very broadly in terms of priorities reflected by those on the table here in terms of the US, French and Germans, in particular in that sort of first echelon. In terms of our approach as far as capability development is concerned, we are looking into the future and trying to be interoperable by design, very much looking through the equipment lens on that front. And from the outset, in terms of developing capability that we are then going to bring into service, to ensure that we have that interoperability in there from the word go. Couple of examples of the way in which we're taking that forward. We're going through an Apache capability sustainment program, having had the Apache D model in service for quite some time now. We did the classic, as was spoken about earlier, go out and buy the Apache D model, but actually we want it with different engines, we want it with different defensive aid suite, we want it with different software. And as a result, we got exactly what we were after, but it drives us down a cul-de-sac in terms of being able to continue to develop and support that aircraft against the numbers of airframes that we have got. And that's quite apart from then being truly interoperable with those people who are operating a similar system, a similar capability, and the ability to do so. So in terms of where we're going with this one, in terms of the Apache Capability Sustainment Program, looking at foreign military sales into Apache E-model, and the key driver for us is to keep it as close as possible to the spec that we will get from the US on that front, and that will have a whole series of benefits that run on from there. Indeed. At the moment, we're looking at two main differences. One is exactly what we have in terms of a defensive aid suite, and the second one is having a wash facility on the windscreen wiper. But it is an important difference in terms of the way we operate the aircraft embarked. Likewise, Chinook, as we look into the future for our heavy lift platform, it is about how do we stay absolutely aligned to the vanilla solution, so that we can we're not diverging down a UK specific avenue for that capability. So really what it's all about then for us from a capability perspective is to eliminate the white space between international partners. It's a great call and hugely challenging on that front. But equipment sits at the heart of that, TTPs, et cetera, et cetera. What is working well on the interoperability front? I think the will and the intent is absolutely there and very strong, and drives us all in the right sort of direction. And we have some very highly professional aviation forces, and all of that is a real strength. And in terms of what we need to look to as far as improvement is concerned, I think better collaboration, both financial and from a capability perspective, and the effect that will therefore have on the capability that we can field, but also the way we can interoperate with our allies. I think there's a big challenge to industry as well, as industry consolidates into bigger companies and so on, in terms of the way that they can help us down, particularly with equipment, down that interoperability pathway. And then cross-pollination, training opportunities, exchanges, and all of that sort of things is absolutely key. And then finally, to finish on, it's looking at tactics, techniques, and procedures, which sit at the heart of how you then use that capability. And a thought really to leave you with that it is absolutely fine to be different, but what is so important is to understand how you can therefore operate together and the mechanisms which will allow you to do so.
Thank you, Colonel Feiffer. Okay, the last presenter that has joined us is Chris Waters, Colonel Chris Waters from the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade, and he's going to talk about some initiatives that they've got going on right now in Europe to work on this concept of interoperability.
So, thank you, sir. I'm sorry I didn't plug in sooner to give you to participate a little bit more proactively, but it's fortuitous that I'm here just to describe some things that we're trying to do, and I'm a little bit remiss for having not plugged in with you, Ham, and with the NATO HISWIG with what we're trying to do, but better late than never. Just a brief overview of 12th Cab. U.S. Army Aviation Restructured Initiative took the brigade down to a smaller, reduced structure. Have an organic attack battalion, Apache attack battalion, and then a theater general support battalion. And we were taking rotational units from the United States and taking OPCON of them for what we're calling Atlantic Resolve, which is the reassurance and deterrence mission for NATO to the Eastern Front. 10th Combat Aviation Brigade has come over and assumed that Atlantic Resolve role, which has further reduced 12th Cab scope. So one of the revised taskings that I proposed to General Hodges in Army Europe for us to do in 12th Cab was to integrate aviation into theater, and as a part of that is really work on the NATO interoperability piece. So when we do have to get together and fight, it's not the first time. So it's right in line with what we're talking about here. Last March, so exactly a year ago, we held our first NATO Rotary Wing Summit. And it was a fledgling effort, but we got 21 countries together for 2 days down in the German Alps in Bavaria and started attriting the interoperability challenge, getting at it. It exceeded my wildest expectations for what we were able to accomplish. And so we decided to run that forum annually. And instead of running it in the spring, we run it in the mid-fall, and I'll kind of explain why. But the NATO Rotary Wing Summit has two major goals, and one is to kind of tactically roll up our sleeves and get at these interoperability challenges that all the presenters here today have described. And so we break down into 9 working groups, and the member nations, the alliance nations, propose the working groups, and they are alliance-led, so a country signs up to lead a working group. And it's everything from communications, secure communications, encryption, over water, deck landings, ALSI support, attack ops, CAS, how we do resupply, refuel, rearm. And so, and those 9 aren't written in stone, and the number 9 is not written in stone. But over 2 of the 3 days in October, this past October, or actually in November, for 2 90-minute sessions twice, we broke down into working groups and got it solving these interoperability challenges. And we intend to kind of keep at that. The second goal of the Rotary Wing Summit is to look at the combined NATO and U.S. Army Europe, and then the member nation national level exercises, to look at that combined exercise schedule and pick opportunities that nations can sign up to go participate in that exercise. And then once we know who's going to participate in a particular exercise, is in front of the exercise during the initial planning conferences and the mid-planning conferences, is decide what our training objectives are and how we're going to. And so all the things in the working groups we talk about, we're going to go practice them with this nation and this nation and this nation during Sabre Guardian, or during Trident Juncture, or doing Polish National Anaconda. And we try to pick those precise exercises that people can agree to come to. We do that. We do the NATO Rotary Wing Summit in October now because it is a month in advance of the United States Army Europe hosted, NATO-sponsored LANCOM, kind of owns it down in Izmir. Is U.S. Army Europe runs on behalf of LANCOM what we call a NATO Combined Training Conference. And that is where all of NATO gets together and looks at the combined training and exercises for the next 3 years, and member nations sign up for participation. And so we're running our forum a month in advance of the NATO Combined Training Conference so that individual rotor wing leadership can see the exercises that are coming up and then return home to their national leadership and try to agree that, hey, these are exercises that we think in the future we can participate in and work on NATO interoperability. Sir, I'm delighted to have you here. We've tried for two summits now to get y'all to come and haven't been successful. I feel like Colonel Curtaz is one of my best buddies, and I know you're busy. I had the opportunity with TF Sabre down in Ouagadougou a couple of years ago down in Mali to work with you or see your guys in action, and you guys are doing great work. And a NATO Rotary Wing Summit or a NATO summit is no summit at all if the French aren't there. So I hope you will try to send some of your team here coming up in this October. It's 15, 16, 17 October, and we're moving it away from Garmisch unwillingly to Budapest, Hungary this year, hopefully. But we've had Danish participation, certainly German participation. This past iteration in November, we had 26 countries attend, and so we've only done it twice, but I think it's gaining momentum. I think that's all. I think that's all I had. If I was going to stress one thing between the human, the technical, and the procedural or the policy components of interoperability, far and away from my view, the most important is the human interaction. We really the third goal of our summit is to get together and team build. So we have some cheer, we have a couple dinners, rub elbows, and a lot of the work gets done just building trust in one another and getting familiarity with one another, so that the next time you see your brother, if you have to go fight with him, you can't surge trust, and so that's got to be built. And so we're using this forum as an opportunity to get together and have some social libations and have some cheer as well. So it's been pretty good. I hope to see you all there. And as far as those non-NATO countries that are in the room, I've worked with you guys before too in Afghanistan, and if we have to go get it with the threat adversary, we're going to need all the help we can get. So we invite y'all at any time, all the time, to come to Europe and participate in the training and exercises we have going on. So, sir, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. One thing that I should highlight is last year I was fortunate enough to go into Colombia again. I'd been there as a younger officer, but I was invited back last year, and I'm not going to pronounce this correct. Please excuse my Spanish. But, it's Civiac. Okay, that's exactly how you say it. Okay, but they have a forum where they literally start in Bogota, and you listen, talk about different things. Every country that comes, a lot came from Europe. Last year, France was represented. Russia was there. I won't get all the countries, but they were Spain, Hispania, all sorts of folks were there. And they talked about this exact issue. And so it's not just happening in NATO, it's happening in Colombia and other places. But after day one, what I didn't know, and I will be better prepared this year, is all the folks in their battle dress uniforms all got on helicopters and airplanes, and we flew all over Colombia, and we're going through the jungles, looking at the narcotics trafficking, how that works, the counter-guerrilla. It was at a very special time in Colombia because they were in the midst of trying to negotiate a peace settlement. So, we weren't talking about certain things, but we knew militarily what we're doing, and a great demonstration. But so all the folks are walking around in BD uniforms, and this is another interoperability point. So I got a lot of trust. I go down. Everybody tells me, yep, come down. We're going to have a big meeting in Bogota. I missed the part about going in the jungle. So I'm in a suit with my shoes walking through the jungle with all my friends in battle dress uniforms. What I told him is, that's okay. It's easy to do it your way. It's harder to do it my way and come out with your shoes still shine. So, but it was a good time, and I would offer to all of you, please take the time to talk back and forth across the aisle, because you've both got great opportunities going on in different places where we can learn from each other. Before I start asking questions, I'm going to kind of tee this up. You know, the one thing that I guarantee you was mentioned here, but it was mentioned by all the panel members. This piece about personnel and people and working together and practicing together and developing those things that work and finding those things that don't work and how do you have to do different things, what that really creates at the end of the day is this sense of trust. It's a huge umbrella. I can love you, like you, kind of like you, don't know you, whatever. But if I actually sit down, and I say this sincerely, if I sit down and have plum vodka or whatever you guys were drinking at that one, if I go down and have cerveza or whatever, if you're sitting there drinking, get in a relaxed atmosphere and talk, you'd be surprised how much progress you make. And you begin to develop that sense of trust that I know the person on my left and right, and I know I can trust them. And the piece about the capabilities in the technical machine, we can overcome the technical differences. But it's really, really hard to overcome a lack of trust. So I'd like to hear kind of folks' thoughts on the panel about how do we build more trust in your mind? How do we go about that? Anybody want to take that first? Okay.
I was I won't mention the country by name, but I was about a month and a half ago, I was talking to the deputy chart of a country. And for those of you, the deputy chart is like you have the chart, which is the chief of all military, and the deputy chart is his deputy. Pretty much simple as that. So the second person in charge of all military affairs. And we were talking about my country, the U.S. And, we're sitting there having some slivovich, having dinner and talking. And I said, what do you think about the interoperability side? And I've known him for some years. And he said, Ham, that's great. Interoperability is a good thing. And he said, but how do I know what your plans are if you don't discuss them with me, if you don't talk about them? All right? How do I know to trust you if we don't build a relationship based on trust? And I said, And I said, so where are you going with this? He said, you guys, the U.S., you come to Europe. He said, I know you have a scale agenda. You have so many countries you create staff talks with, etc., which is true. He said, but again, I need the support of a flag officer from the U.S. to come in just to stop by. And I'll use this term I got from Lieutenant General Hogue. He's retired, to do a drive-by. Okay? And I said, really? A drive-by? I said, so you, yeah. He said, yeah, General Hogue. He uses that term. He was the mil rep at Nato for 3 or 4 years. And he said, that sets the precedence for me. He said, that provides me with the opportunity to get to know him, to be able to talk to him, to be able to share our ideas and receive theirs. I can take that back to my soldiers, to the political side of the house, and provide them with some thought. But also I can build a relationship where if I need something or if I have an idea for something, I can reach out. He said, but I can't do that until we make that contact. And he said, how do we? So again, that's another job that I have to do with the leadership on the side, my side, General Hicks and General Anderson. And I'll tell you a strange story. He was sort of baiting me because May of last year, he and General Anderson was at the Indianapolis 500 riding around in the pace car. And so I fed that back up through the chain. It hit pay dirt. And so the connection was made. But again, because of the requirements, they had to hear it. It had to come up. It had to be done from the bottom up. Sometimes bottom up is not a bad thing. Top down gets you an execution much faster, but the bottom up is sometimes more tasteful. It's like cooking a steak.
Other comments?
I can't credit this to I can't take credit for this, but a mentor of mine said there's 3 ways to build a team. and then I've added a fourth here recently. But the first one is the crucible of combat, and there's no substitute for that. But you don't want to have to go that route if you can choose. The second one is good hard training or shared physical misery, which is why good PT or doing hard training at your unit level is great for building a team. But then the third is the social interaction and imbibing a little bit, and so. Now, my buddy Greg Anderson, who's the commander of the 173rd Sky Soldiers down in Vicenza, Italy, he added a fourth to me, which was a good night drop followed by a long walk, an airborne drop at night, and then move out tactically. We'll build a team too, but I think that falls in one of those categories there. But I would just say the last year during Operation Anaconda in Poland, we had. A Polish 05 squadron and a U.S. Attack battalion working, in the field in the same assembly area with their two 05 level TOCs right next to each other inside the same wire, and flying together, training together, working together, and before and after the exercise, socially interacting and having some cheer, and there's no substitute for that. And the only way to build trust is to get together and work together. And then we saw it with Czechs and U.S. and Belgian crews working together at Hohenfeldt's Maneuver Center this past fall for an Allied Spirit rotation, and had some pretty good success tactically, but more so built trust and familiarity in one another and how we operate, what our strengths and weaknesses are, what our capabilities and limitations are, what our national caveats, what your nation is going to permit you to do and not to do, and so just rolling up your sleeves and getting at it in conference rooms or in training, I think, is the best way by far to build trust.
Anybody else want to talk about that? Oh, okay. That one in front of you? I'm just checking. I just want to know if we're interoperable here.
Okay. Your question was trust, and I think you can do it in a more informal way to use something like this summit, trade shows, meetings, to get in contact with the other comrades. On the other hand, it's very, very important to use every possibility for a common exercises and or use it in, for example, an expert group. For example, we have with our French friends an air mobile expert group that normally once to twice a year sit together and only speaking about things. For example, Mali. The experience of the French guys in Mali are very worthwhile for us, and without have a special topic, only to come together and speak about this small problems, maybe, that is a baseline, I think, to create trust in the skills and abilities of the other guys and the other countries.
I'd just throw one word in there, which I think is at the heart of it all, which is understanding. And all of the activities that have been spoken about here, that's all about generating that understanding. And that is what, therefore, breeds the trust in which you can then develop on.
Yes, just one word. I hope trust is not an issue. We are alive for years, and the issue is more how to renounce of part of our habits, procedures, because to find a consensus, that's the effort we have to do, all of us, each of us, and this is quite difficult to do, and it's a long discussion, which is easier, I think, when you're face to face with two people, but when you're 20, it's quite tough. So hopefully, I think trust is not a main issue. We are all have the same objectives and the same ambitions.
Is there anybody in the audience that has a question that they'd like to say? Yes, sir, please.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Roy Pines from the Netherlands. I'm one of the
Well, it is a great question, and to kind of highlight a couple of examples that we talked about for those of you who weren't here last year. One is that their equipment was purchased from the U.S. and being used by different countries, and they couldn't get the technical manuals from the U.S. on how the equipment operates because of a legal restriction. That doesn't make any sense. I was in Iraq, and the division DCG, the Corps DCG, Deputy Commanding General for 3 Corps, was a Canadian. A great guy, good friend of mine. But because of the legal ramifications around what we call SIPRNet, our high security network, he was not allowed to have access, even though he was a DCG, to that SIPRNet. So what he had was an American aide, and this captain would go through and screen all the email that came to the DCG of the Corps on SIPRNet, print it out, that could be printed out, hand it to the Canadian DCG, who would then read it, do a handwritten note, and it would have to then be typed back into SIPRNet. So we were talking about examples of this last year. And it includes the LNOs. And I would ask all of you, because it's not just at the schoolhouse where we have LNOs. We have LNOs embedded in forces and other places. Do you treat your LNO? Ask yourself internally, do you treat your LNO like you treat any other soldier in your organization? Because when we say we all have trust, we do, but I will tell you that if you're the guy or gal that's sitting in the room that they say, oh, we're about to talk about something, and you can't do it. Or another one that's really fun is when you're sitting in a room and we switch languages, because we know that most people don't know the other language we're speaking. In Korea, I literally would have people switch into Hangul, start speaking Korean, and they would look at me and go, how do you know what we're talking about? Well, when you say in Hangul, Hashimika Mundt, okay, I kind of understand my last name. I may not know exactly what you said, but I know you're talking about me, so you can kind of start to work through those things, but it's exactly that. And so we did take that issue last year. I will not even begin to profess that we've solved that issue. I think General Gaylor has a much, much better handle on it now than we had a year ago. At least that's what I'm hearing. And it's trying to get after this exact thing. But one of the things that was mentioned up here is the legal issues. It is amazing to me how many lawyers are paid to try to figure out how we ought to fight. And we're the folks that actually get thrown in the fray. So at some point, it's incumbent upon commanders to go back to their lawyers who are putting legal roadblocks in front of them and say, stop telling me why I can't do this and start telling me how can I do this, okay? Because it's insane. That SIPRNet should never have been an issue in country. There should never, I will tell you, Colombia was another case. About 4 years ago, they have a lot of the ALSI gear that we wore, and they wanted to set up a training program down there. And I had to go to the CG of Fort Rucker and finally to the TRADOC commander. I was retired, and say, guys, this is crazy. Why is it they can't have the doctrine and the information on how to train and maintain their survival vests. Didn't make any sense. So, absolutely good point. Others want to comment on that? Okay.
I would just comment from Army Europe's standpoint and the commanding general, General Hodges, this is his guidance to his commanders. Share until it hurts, share until you think you're going to go to jail, and then share a little more. And so, and I've been there where I've thought, okay, if I get looked at on this one, I'm going to go to jail. But it's the right thing to do. I spent a lot of time in the soft world, and the watermark, I think, for sharing the right way was General McChrystal. When it comes to lives on the battlefield, I don't think foreign disclosure is gonna be a big inhibitor. I would say having LNOs in your space makes it real hard not to share, and so that's almost a must when we're working together in NATO, is to swap LNOs. So it breaks down a lot of barriers. I have a nickname for my lawyer. I call him Dr. No. That's all he seems to say.
Well, this is the one thing where I'll give NATO a B grade. 10 years ago, most likely the answer to sharing was obsolete. But because of the understandings, especially in the cyber world, which is where NATO is right now, the vision of the last 5 years, there's a huge abundance of sharing across. And therefore, the 28 nations will meet, vote on the sharing of information, especially with partners. And Brazil, I've been in exercises. I think you'll be in an exercise, one that I mentioned, CL-19, in that sense. And I'm going to give some advertisement to CL-19 on this. It's a non-NATO funded exercise. Non-NATO funded. The minimum of them, we had CL-13, CL-15, 32 nations at the first one, 36 at the second iteration. Everything that's done there, from the sharing of information, is done across the board. If you have a deficiency, it's noted, and it's presented all across NATO. So nothing is hidden, nothing is swept under the rug. The one thing that we miss is the helicopter environment. And both iterations, this is where you can test drive what you write, what you produce as nations. You can test drive it. You can say it's wrong, it's not correct. It will be printed on paper. The reason why I can tell you, because I'm the director of evaluation. So I hold no bars. I'm not here to make friends in writing the information. If you do well, it's printed well. If it's done incorrectly, it is done incorrectly. And again, that product is produced and sent. That we developed the evaluation team, which consists of NATO nations. It's under the umbrella of the military committee. That is the military committee's gift to this environment. So again, the information of sharing is across, because we use all NATO standards in this exercise. So again, we have to get the approval for partner nations, friendly nations that are involved, but we do, and it's a successful side of the house.
Okay, we're getting close to the time, and I want to be cognizant of that, because a lot of folks have things they've got to do this evening. One is I want to thank all the panel members. I think they've done an excellent job coming in and doing that, and thank you for stepping up. Thanks for everybody coming. Here's the homework assignment, okay? We're going to do this again next year. I guarantee you. It's because I'm president, I get to have some choices here. But what I'd like to do next year, and I want to know, from the group, but I'd like more participation from more countries, but what I'd really like to do is get down at the what I would call the tactical level, and let's talk about the things that you have done in this last year and the results. In other words, what was the exercise? What was the attempt to be an interoperable, and how is that working? And I'm going to give one to the schoolhouse at Fort Rucker, okay? Because I want to know how well the LNOs are being integrated down at Fort Rucker, okay? Okay, I know. I'm just going to check that one because I'm making sure, all right? Thank you very much. I appreciate it again, and you all have a great day. Don't forget the Black Tie Affair tonight.